The Adirondack Park is home to some of the most beautiful wild places in the world. People seek it out for many reasons: the exercise, the views, the quiet. The Adirondack Park Agency wants to make the park's wilderness areas more accessible for people with physical disabilities, but some worry a proposal to expand that access could open the land up to all kinds of motorized vehicles. So what defines wilderness, and how should we handle disability access in the Adirondacks? We take a look at that debate on today's Story of the Day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com.
Hi, I'm Kara Chapman. It's Wednesday, November 27th. Up first, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik says her home in Saratoga County was the target of a bomb threat this morning. She wasn't there at the time. Her office says that she, her husband, and their 3-year-old son were on their way home from Washington for Thanksgiving when they learned of the threat. Stefanik thanked state, local, and federal law enforcement who responded. The Republican, who was elected to a 6th term this month, has been chosen by President-elect Donald Trump to serve as ambassador to the United Nations. A statement from Trump's transition team says several other cabinet nominees and administration appointees were targeted by bomb threats and hoax swatting calls Tuesday night and this morning. That includes former Long Island Congressman Lee Zeldin, Trump's pick to lead the Environmental Protection Agency. The FBI says it's aware of the threats and working with its law enforcement partners. The agency says it takes all potential threats seriously. New York State Police are urging people to drive safely and sober this weekend. Thanksgiving is the most traveled holiday of the year, and tonight is known as Black Wednesday because it's one of the busiest nights for bars. The period between Thanksgiving and New Year's sees an estimated 25,000 injuries nationwide from alcohol-related crashes each year. Along with encouraging safe driving, police are also urging people to make a plan for who will stay sober and drive on Thanksgiving. A new thrift store and food pantry is officially open in Lake Placid. Thrive and Thrift combined the existing local pantry and the Helping Hands thrift shop, which had to close last November. The thrift store was the main funding source for the food pantry, which was also outgrowing its space in the basement of St. Agnes Church. As the Adirondack Daily Enterprise reports, Thrive and Thrift was made possible by a big community effort involving local churches, government, and builders. The food pantry will be open each Friday from 9 a.m. to noon. The thrift store will open sometime in December. Governor Kathy Hochul signed 5 consumer protection laws this week. They're meant to protect consumers from potential fraud and save people money. Amy Feiereisel has the details.
The first law requires health clubs, like gyms, to cancel a membership within 10 days of notice. It also requires health clubs to allow cancellations online. The second prohibits administrative or handling fees at the end of a car lease, essentially eliminating a turn-in fee. Another consumer protection law requires telemarketers to provide certain information within the first 30 seconds of a call. Telemarketers now have to say the name, mailing address, and telephone number of the person on whose behalf the call is made. The idea is to make it easier to know when you're receiving a spam call and where it's coming from. The fourth law requires restaurants with online delivery service to make recent health inspection grades available to customers online by posting a link on their website or mobile app. Lastly, it's now illegal to block the label or packaging on over-the-counter drugs and cosmetics. Governor Kathy Hochul says the legislative package, which she signed on Monday, is designed to protect consumers and save them money at a time when New Yorkers are experiencing, quote, the devastating effect of rising prices, end quote. Amy Feiereisel, North Country Public Radio.
More Adirondack wilderness could become more accessible next year. The Adirondack Park Agency wants to expand wilderness access for people with physical disabilities. But some environmentalists worry that could open up wild and pristine areas to all kinds of motorized vehicles. Emily Russell reports.
If you had to define the Adirondacks in a few words, what would you say? Maybe you'd call it Forever Wild, a clause that's actually baked into the state's constitution. Or maybe you'd say it's for the people. After all, it includes 2.6 million acres of public land. Forever Wild and for the people. But there's been a debate unfolding in recent months about who can access those public lands and how they can do it in wilderness areas. The debate centers on disability access in the park, and it came up at the most recent Adirondack Park Agency board meeting.
The idea that an injury is supposed to leave you sitting on a porch this day and age, looking and longing at what you once thought you could do, is just wrong.
That's Jerry Delaney from the Local Government Review Board. He said the APA should do more to expand access.
Last I knew, the Adirondacks was for all of us. It wasn't just for those of us that can still walk and climb.
But the debate is complicated. It starts with the APA. Every 5 years, the agency is required to review its master plan. That's the document that sets policies for the park. This year, the APA is proposing a new set of amendments, including one on accessibility. The APA's Kevin Prickett outlined it at a public hearing in October.
New language requires DEC to inventory existing structures and improvements that meet accessibility standards in the unit management plan, as well as identify management actions to make recreational programs and features more accessible for individuals with disabilities.
Basically, it calls on the state to look at where it does and does not meet accessibility standards. It also calls for broadening what kinds of vehicles people with disabilities can use to access wilderness. Right now, someone in a wheelchair is allowed anywhere in the park where a pedestrian is allowed. In its new amendment, the APA wants to add anyone using an OPDMD to the provision, which stands for Other Power-Driven Mobility Devices. It's a mouthful, but it basically means most things beyond a wheelchair. Think electric scooter, golf carts, even Segways. And the new amendment does not require those devices to be designed specifically for people with disabilities. That's where the debate heats up. It's that added provision that worries some environmentalists.
The proposed definition of OPDMD and other references to OPDMDs in the proposed amendment should be deleted.
That's Claudia Bramer from Protect the Adirondacks. She spoke at the public hearing in October. Right now, there are broad swaths of the Adirondacks where motorized vehicles aren't allowed, where peace and quiet reign supreme. By allowing the use of ATVs or scooters, Bramer said everyone's experience in the park's wildest places could change.
Allowing motor vehicles in wilderness, primitive, and canoe areas where such use is currently prohibited by Article 14 of the New York State Constitution would be a fundamental alteration of the very program that provides people of all abilities with a challenging primitive experience and protects natural resources.
I just want to strengthen and reiterate what the previous speaker has said so well.
That's Dave Gibson from Adirondack Wild, who spoke after Bramer at the same public hearing. He, too, pushed back on the APA's new accessibility amendment.
Nothing in the Americans with Disabilities Act or its regulations require DEC and APA to change the motor vehicle definition. That's at the heart of the master plan.
It's important to note that the proposed amendment doesn't appear to open wilderness areas up to just anyone on an electric scooter or ATV. We reached out to the APA for an interview to clarify some details, but the agency declined. What we do know is that the DEC would be responsible for determining, quote, where the use of OPDMDs may be appropriate. That's an important detail, says Scott Remington, who's on the APA and DEC's Accessibility Advisory Committee.
They're not going to let you take a ATV into Farrow Lake just because you can't walk. I think the environmentalists are just blowing this all out of proportion.
Remington himself hasn't been back to Farrow Lake in more than 25 years. That's after he was paralyzed from the waist down in a logging accident. Since then, his access to wilderness areas has diminished. So he thinks the APA should make the park more accessible. Remington says it's about finding a balance.
I think everybody likes to have the Adirondack experience. You know, you want a peace and quiet, but also if we can make it a little more accessible for some people, that's good too.
Members of the public can submit comments on all the proposed amendments to the park's master plan until next Monday, December 2nd. The APA board is expected to vote on the measures later this winter. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio.
We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Just as a heads up, we won't be airing Story of the Day or Northern Light tomorrow or Friday due to the holiday, but we'll be back, as usual, on Monday. Music today by Alan Dunham of South Glens Falls and Tim Ellifritz of Johnsburg. Have a happy and safe Thanksgiving. I'm Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio.